Danny Rand returns as the immortal Iron Fist in Season 2 of Netflix Iron Fist. Join us as Johnnie Torch Reviews Iron Fist Season 2. Well, here we are once again with another live broadcast. We have Iron Fist Season 2 to take a look at today. And let's see, right off the bat, I have to say, laying some groundwork as I want to do, I was a pretty big fan of the original first season of Iron Fist on Netflix. It was largely panned by and large, and as usual, I don't take whatever is popular or unpopular to heart. I had to see for myself, and I was quite satisfied with Iron Fist season one. Now, this show inherently has the Netflix problem that I've always said, which is they don't trust in their costumes, they don't trust in the visual representation of the character, and the shows tend to meander and be very talky, and they tell not show more often than not. I felt that the first season of Iron Fist, apart from the first complaint, was pretty consistent. Now they did try to address, I think, the second complaint by showing a few more visual cues from Iron Fist from the comics than they did in the first season. But let's get to it all. As usual, this is a live broadcast. I don't have any notes. I'm just going off the top of my head. I watched the Luke Cage season two for it took about a week. I binged it and we did a video. So check that one out if you're so inclined. And in this case, it was a little more scattershot. I couldn't get it together to watch these episodes in a binge format. It took about 2 weeks for me to get the whole show done. And this show is actually shorter than all the other shows. This is only 10 episodes long, where all the other shows have been 13. I've been a proponent of this for the Netflix shows alone because for some reason the Netflix shows, like I said, are too long in the tooth and meandering, where I don't advocate that shows have a shorter season run, because I believe you should be talented enough, if you're a professional, to write a compelling season long arc that'll last for 22 episodes or whatever the norm is nowadays. It was 24, now I think it's 22. But in any case, we're going to take this apart systematically. I'll try to get to all the points. Hopefully, I can remember them all. This will be a spoiler filled review. So if you have not seen this season all the way through, normally I would suggest you don't continue with this video and watch it. But I think maybe in some cases it's better if you're on the fence and you really don't know what to expect. Maybe this will either push you over the fence and you'll be curious enough to check it out, or maybe you'll just decide, nah, that's all I needed to know and it's not worth my time. So one way or the other, this might help you make up your mind. So, but just remember spoilers, and you continue at your own peril. Okay, so like I said, picking up where the last season left off. Uh, I thought the first season, well, you can check out my review for the first season. It's still up. I'm sure you'll find it quite easily. But apart from the first three episodes, possibly four, I felt the series was strong. It was populated with some good characters, populated with some great performances. I really liked Davos, who was sort of a fledgling, an up and coming villain. I loved his relationship with Danny, and I was really excited to see that expounded upon in season two. And one of the highlights of the season is that it truly does expound on that relationship. We get to see some of the backstory and flashback. We get to see how Davos' sort of ambition, I suppose, for lack of a better term, is what puts these two at odds. And it's a very compelling story. I think this is a good storyline. I do feel that the first season was much more straightforward. This one feels a lot more meandering. I felt that there was a direct narrative purpose in the first season. Here, I feel like they've kind of gone off on different side paths. And like I said in my Luke Cage review, season 2 of Luke Cage, I said I think Luke Cage was pretty strong in that. Season 2 was strong in that The side paths, the subplots, they were a lot more compelling. And so I think they were more compelling than the side plots in Iron Fist season 2. However, I still would probably put Iron Fist season 2 over Luke Cage season 2 because the characters were of more interest to me. And I even said this in the Luke Cage season 2 review. I didn't like Black Mariah. She's not a likable character by any means. Shades was not as endearing. You know, I mean, we had a lot of subplots that I really wouldn't care to sit through again. I would sit through the subplots of Iron Fist season 2 again. We have Typhoid Mary, which was interesting. We'll get to her. We'll get to these all systematically. Ward returns, and his storyline was quite interesting. I thought it went off in an unexpected direction. Joy Meacham, of course, and her ties to Davos. But I think that they meandered, and that's what is the biggest sin to me of the Netflix shows. They cannot keep it very tight. One of the things I do like about Iron Fist that sets it above all the other shows, such as Luke Cage, Daredevil, even though Daredevil's one of my favorite heroes, what sets it above them is this does feel like what we would get out of a Marvel CW show. Now, what I mean by that is it's good in the sense that it's not overly dark. There are a couple of adult situations this season, and I can't really think of too many real graphic violent scenes. But apart from one or two instances, this show could be on the CW, and it would be better than the CW shows because it doesn't involve a lot of shipping and shipper culting. I mean, we get some emotional beats between Colleen and Daniel, but it doesn't really belabor that into the ground the way the CW shows do. Now, in fact, one of the CW Arrow showrunners or writers, I'm not sure, I can't remember which exactly right now, but it took part in this season's creation for Iron Fist. So it does feel like that. So I think if you like the CW shows, you will gravitate to Iron Fist more, both seasons. But ultimately, the season did have some problems for me, meandering. Now let's oh, it's gonna be hard to get around navigating with all the subplots and stuff. We will start with again. I don't remember a whole lot about Defenders, even though I profess to really like that season. But we'll go back to Danny Rand at first. Now he is trying to pick up the slack, taking care of the neighborhood, the New York area. Now that Matt Murdock has gone missing, and he is trying to enlist Colleen Wing's help, and Colleen is very insistent that she doesn't want to get back on the saddle when it comes to fighting crime and the daring do. She's closed the dojo, and she has hung her hand saber on the wall and is not going to have any of it. Danny kind of tries to coax her out of this shell several times during the season. At first, to no avail. Um, there's the factions that are growing restless. The Tigers and the Hatchets, I believe, are the gang factions that are trying to encroach on the neighborhood. All right, on the side here we have Colleen Wing, who again there is a subplot with her that is sort of a very thin thread for next season, I believe, where we deal with her mother having some involvement um somehow in Kunlun. And that's very interesting. She finds a box with a hairbrush, and somehow the medallion Danny finds out is tied to Kunlun, I believe. Somehow, again, this is just sort of the most threadbare plot line, but this is completely carried over for what they will hope will be a third season. And that's kind of interesting. Not much is made out of it. All right, then we have let's go over to Ward next. Ward, I've always liked this actor. Again, I don't have any notes, so I don't remember the names of many, if any, of the actors. But This actor is a very good actor. He's a very interesting actor. I believe I compared him in the first season as a cross between James Woods and Frank Wally. He's got some really good dramatic acting chops, like James Woods, and he's got this sort of semi-comical look about him, like Frank Wally, where you don't know if you can take him entirely seriously by his sort of comedic steps at certain times. But again, a very good actor. They did some unexpected things with the character. In the first season, he was the most ruthless, and you felt for him as he very subtly started changing because he had the issues with his father, and he was protecting his sister, and his father was this Rasputin character that the Hand was continuing to prop up. And in this season, he is also very much sympathetic. Not so much at first. We see him in rehab, and he is making out with his attractive sponsor, or the head of the Narcotics Anonymous, I believe it is. Not, although he does have problems with alcoholism, as we see later on in the season, and he tries desperately to make himself better, but he's still sort of the uptight jerk that he was for most of the first season. And he tries desperately to make amends with his sister. And it's interesting to find Joy on the opposite side of that now. Joy is the one who was more likable in the first season, and she's somewhat unlikable now, although as the end of the last season as the last season ended, we kind of were forced into Joy being an antagonist, and it didn't really feel that earned. And it still doesn't really feel that earned here. We'll get to her more in a second, but Ward ends up finding out that his girlfriend is expecting, that they're expecting, and he tries very sincerely to try to mend fences with her as he fell off the wagon and started drinking and getting into bar fights and stuff. Again, this stuff was well acted and sort of a worthwhile character progression, but again, this storyline did feel somewhat meandering, and I kind of felt that it was, completely detached from the rest of the show. Nothing that goes on here in Ward's personal life really affects the story overall, although, one would argue that his relationship with his sister is sort of a direct tie-in to the overall plot. All right, going over to Joy now. Joy is in cahoots with Davos, and she is sort of bankrolling him, and she wants to get bought out of the company, out of Rand Industries or what have you. And she is taking it very personal that Ward kept her father's existence a secret because, of course, Ward's father and Joy's father was, like I said, a Rasputin that was just not able to be killed, and then he continually came back and he worked for the Hand. And so she took this very personal, and they do take time to try to express her disillusionment with her brother and with Danny. I don't know that they fully convince me that she was a complete sellout to be evil. I think you get a sense at the end of the show that she wasn't quite all that evil. It's just a case of her being hurt. She was very hurt by her brother's actions and to an extent Danny, and this sort of forced her into a position where she wanted revenge slash wanted out from under their shadow. So again, I don't know how well that really scored as a storyline, as a subplot. There were some things at the beginning of the season with her taking Davos somewhat under her wing and trying to make him a little bit more unsavory. She tries to get him to seduce, I guess, and she does accomplish getting him to seduce a rich woman who has the pottery they need and so forth. And in Davos, now we'll talk a little more about Davos now. Davos is he's a really good actor, this guy, and he's really, really a good character. And you get the sense that he has this strange type of nobility about him, that he has his own code of honor that probably makes sense to no one but himself, because he's willing to kill almost as a second nature. But it's not quite like the Kingpin, who sort of like will fly off on a rage and kill when offended. But it's almost that. It's almost that. It's just that he has more of a code where it has to completely be at odds with his code, and he sort of is trying to play Joy and get her to be more quote unquote honorable like him, because she is more of the underhanded, trying to do things from under the table, so to speak. And she, in a way, is trying to coax him over to being more underhanded and not being just a outright force to be reckoned with, but to try to do things sort of under the table, so to speak. And they don't ever become a romantic thing, which I guess is necessary because, Davos, again, having this kind of code and this nobility where he is sort of trying to keep himself pure in this code that he has created for himself, doesn't allow himself to get romantic, although you could see that he does seem to, at least to me anyway, in the latter half of this series of the season, have an attraction for her, that he kind of desperately wants her to be trustworthy. And you could play that anyway. Maybe he just wants her to be trustworthy, that he continues to work with her, but I think he kind of wants more of an intimate relationship, not necessarily even romantic, but just that he can trust her. All right, so we have a lot of Davos backstory here, which I thought was really fascinating. We have the fight, a really bloody and brutal fight between he and Dany for the power of the Iron Fist. We later find out that his mother was sort of the driving force behind him, and she disowned him for all intents because he lost that fight. And of course, that can be a very driving factor in a person when their parents disown them. And basically, that is what drives Davos to be so driven, that his mother basically disowns him for losing the fight that he was born and raised for. He was born and raised to be the Iron Fist. And it's one of those things, like, like I say, a lot of the Netflix Marvel shows have a hint of Old Testament to them. I said I thought Luke Cage season one was very closely tied to the story of Abraham, Hagar, and Sarah. And this one to me felt a lot more like sort of the Jacob and Esau, and how both brothers were, favored, but Esau was favored for being the oldest. And it's an interesting, dynamic, I think, that's kind of played out here. Rebecca being the mother that disapproves of Esau but approves of Jacob. And it's the same thing here almost, where Davos' mother is disapproving of Dany getting the Iron Fist and sort of tries to push Davos, and then in a strange sort of, you know, mirror version of the biblical tale, ends up um, disowning Davos. But anyway, so we get to see the bloody and brutal fight. We get to see the mask, the Iron Fist mask, which they tease a couple of times. I don't know why yet Dany doesn't wear it, especially when you see in some of the earlier portions of the series, he's got the mask around his face in sort of a, for lack of a better term, train robber style, sort of like the Shadow, if you can think of it that way. And eventually, of course, he sort of just gives up on using that because everybody and their brother seems to know at this point that he's the Iron Fist in the underworld. So it's not necessarily wear it, but it's stupid that he doesn't have any kind of protection for his identity. Claire Temple is not in this season. I think she's mentioned once or twice. This is probably, from what I know, the first of the original shows that doesn't have Claire Temple in it. So that was interesting. We get an appearance of Misty Knight, which now I know I said I would even watch a Misty Knight series because again, she's a great actress and that's a great character, but I felt she kind of overstayed her welcome. And I'm going to say what I think the biggest problem of this season was. We've got the lack of costumes, we've got the sort of meandering subplots, but I think the problem was Iron Fist didn't really feel like the star of his own show this season. That was kind of my problem with it. I kind of felt like Davos took a lot of the front role. I think Colleen Wing took a lot of the sidekick role and took it over as the lead role. I think Misty Knight took over the sidekick role from Colleen, and I think the subplot of Typhoid Mary also sort of took away from what was the hero, which was Iron Fist. Now, this is something that I'm traditionally used to complaining about, really. I mean, I always say when you have the hero giving up the power or the power is taken away from them, you pretty much are having your hero and his tail at a disadvantage. Spider-Man 2, I felt it. Iron Man 3, I felt it. Um, I guess you could arguably say the Winter Soldier, I felt it, where the hero is not in costume, he's not doing his thing, and it's up to somebody else to sort of pick up the slack. That's kind of what I feel is happening here in this show. Now, the biggest insult probably is because I love Colleen and I love Misty Knight. So having them together doing a little, sidekick, tete-a-tete or whatever they call it in the in sort of the subplot areas of the show was fine. But then we come to this point where Davos steals the Iron Fist. Now that sounds exciting all on its own. Davos gets a red fist, and Danny has a yellow one. When the twain shall meet, this will be exciting. Unfortunately, they both don't have the Iron Fist at the same time. What ends up happening is they get the Crane sisters. I don't know if that's just their title or whatever, to perform a ceremony on Danny to take the Iron Fist away from Danny, and Davos wants it to empower himself. Later on, Danny is sort of tries to take on Davos, and he gets his leg broken in sort of the Dark Knight Rises fashion, where we're supposed to be led to believe that although he looks to be crippled for several months, all he really needs is a knee brace from Rand Industries and a little fine tuning in his martial arts technique, and he'll be fine. That was a little bit, like I said, Dark Knight Rises territory, where it's like, okay, a punch in the back will fix a broken spine. It's this kind of things that we have to, say is fantasy, and we gotta give a little leeway. And then there's some places where we can say, I don't know if I buy that. All right, so again, we're getting all over the place, but let's just get to this main objection I have. So Danny wants to come back and fight Davos in true superhero fashion, and he finally coaxes Colleen to try and help him. At first, she refuses, and he admits that he's going to do it anyway, so he's going to train himself. And I really liked that. That I think was my favorite part of the story for Danny, where he is desperately trying to get back. I'm a sucker for that too. I'm a sucker for the superhero trying to get on the comeback trail and try to get back in shape in time to take out the bad guy. And he's trying desperately, and it's not coming out so well. And then he finally gets Colleen on his side, and she takes him to the steel cage, and they're fighting there, where she was originally introduced in the first season. All great stuff. I loved that stuff. Eventually, though, Danny turns all zen, which I guess is what the Iron Fist is known for. But he is like, I can't take the Iron Fist back. The one who should take the Iron Fist back is Colleen. And I'm like scratching my head thinking, why? Did she fight a dragon and beat a dragon? Was this something that she trained all her life for? Is this something that's destined for her? And the answer is no. And I don't understand why the last few episodes of the season is dedicated to Danny doing an about face and saying, well, the Iron Fist has become too much to me, so I can't have it now. I got to give it to somebody else. Well, that's sort of what you are entrusted with. You are supposed to be using that for the good of mankind. You're not supposed to be handing it off to the next person. Again, in Shades of the Dark Knight Rises, where Bruce wants to hand off the Batman mantle to someone else, and it feels the same way here. It feels like, well, I've done my part, and I don't want to be, intoxicated by the role I have to play, and I'm going to hand it off to Colleen. And well, good luck to her because she's got to take on my responsibility now. Same thing as Bruce with John Blake. I don't like that when they do that in these stories. Now, there is an epilogue where apparently we join Danny. I forget what it is. 3 months in the future, 6 months in the future. He goes off with Ward at the end of the series, and they're looking for. I don't know exactly what they're looking for. Looking for answers. Of course, like I said, it ties into Colleen's mother somehow. But anyhow, it's revealed that they both have the Iron Fist now. Colleen, of course, takes on the Iron Fist. Excuse me. She gets sort of halfway powers, and they have to subdue Davos to get the full power back. And I kept praying during this entire scenario that somehow Danny would step in, get the power back, and maybe all three would share the power. Now, ultimately, that's what happens, but it's not a successfully engaging resolution because at the end of it, when, Colleen finally corners Davos, she gets the powers from Davos. Davos don't have the power anymore. Colleen has all the power now, and Danny doesn't have any. So basically, if they would have done Danny getting some share of the power and Colleen getting some share of the power, and maybe even Davos getting some small percentage of the power. Now, he was overpowered. He had two Iron Fists at full power, at full strength. And if we kept him with just one, maybe, or it wasn't quite as strong, I don't know. They could have done something. I am just satisfied that Davos survived. Like I said, I was very happy with Davos, with his treatment in the season. But anyway, we have Colleen taking on as protector of the city. Danny goes off, and again, that is something that I wasn't too thrilled about either, because again, I don't like the hero pushing their responsibilities off on someone else. Colleen can let her sword turn into a glowy stick with her Iron Fist powers, which was cool. She's got a white Iron Fist, and we have Danny somewhere in China or something, and he has two glowing Iron Fists, and he can shoot bullets from guns that are glowing and like extensions of the Iron Fist. This was really interesting, and like I said, I would have rather seen that at the end of the season than push it off to the third season and hope that there's a third season, which I guess they're all in now. They have to have a third season. But apparently, this has gone over pretty well. This season, I think it's safe that they'll get another season because there was touch and go whether they would get a second season. And they did get a second season because apparently that was one of the highest rated for people tuning in to Netflix shows. All right, so let's try to cover some more bases. So again, not a wildly successful conclusion. I wanted the resolution to be a little more exciting than it was. We did get Joy kind of turning her life around. She turns on Davos and tries to get the bowl back so that Danny can get the Iron Fist powers back, which eventually, again, that power goes to Colleen. Misty Knight has a lot to do in the end of it as well. She gets her arm ruined in battle, which was pretty exciting to think that maybe they'll soup it up because, like I said, I didn't honestly think it looked that cool. I mean, it just looked like a prosthetic arm in the sense of like a person wearing a glove. I would like them to have some more bells and whistles on it, but again, you work with the budget you have. Uh, so Joy gets thrown off the ledge, and she gets like separated shoulder or whatever, fractured ribs. And again, this is some pretty good character growth for Joy. I don't know where this is going to bring her. She kind of makes peace with Ward. She kind of admits that she was acting like a skunk. She was going a little too far. And the strange bedfellows she made with Typhoid Mary, of course, comes back to bite her when Typhoid Mary ends up sort of not allowing their partnership to end. Now, I want to talk about Typhoid Mary at the end here, but before we wrap up, but yeah, the interesting thing with Joy is where does she go from here? Because she kind of turned herself around. Now, there's another aspect here we have of the street gang Colleen befriends, particularly BB, I think was his name, was the lead kid that was kind of two minds about what he was doing, and she was trying to convince them to, come to her place or whatever it was where they were helping out the neighborhood, and they refuse, and they end up following under Davos. And Davos, again, we get to see more of Davos's backstory here, where they were truly friends, he and Danny. And you see them in childhood, you see them as they get older, and you can really tell, like I said, that he's driven and he wants to, make his mother proud, but he wants to reclaim his birthright. And he thinks he can be a better Iron Fist than Danny, and he calls himself the Immortal Iron Fist. And his idea is, again, it's dealt with semi comically, I think, where he's got a guy that's an underling with a patch on his eye, and he's like crossing off names of all the major gang members in the city, and he just goes in, lights up the fist, punches them through walls, then comes out next, and it's kind of comical actually. And it's funny because it seems like he's doing a good cleanup at first. It seems like, well, he's not really doing anything bad. He's not hurting good people. And the cops are even sort of like saying, look, if he's going to clean up gangbangers or whatever, then we're just going to look the other way. But eventually he's trying to, and and the thing is that's cool about this is that he's eventually trying to bring purpose to the street kids, and he's trying to give them a purpose by training them in the manner that he was trained, which is brutal, but still gives them the discipline that they lack on their own. And I thought this was really cool too. Um, but it all goes south when, of course, like I said, his code is such that it is very strange. It's tempestuous, I suppose. I'm trying to find an adjective that'll do, but Joy tries to rein him in on that, and he goes out and basically kills a guy, a shop owner, who basically didn't buy in wholesale what Davos was selling. He was just like, "Oh, I don't want any trouble here. Just leave me alone, and we'll be good. Okay, okay, we good." And Davos is like, that shows like a lack of faith and a lack of trust in me, and he basically kills the guy. And the street gang ends up turning on each other basically, and one of them kills BB, which was Colleen's, friend. He's the one that helped Joy, and so I fully expected someone to die in this season, and I don't want to say thankfully it was BB, but it wasn't one of the main characters. I thought it might be Joy. I thought it might be Ward. Thought it might be Davos. I'm glad they're all still alive to return, hopefully for a third season. But it was sad to see that BB is the one that had to go because he was an invaluable assistance to Joy and Colleen and so forth. Okay, so I'm holding off a bit on Typhoid Mary, and I really don't know what to say about Typhoid Mary because I really liked that character as a kid in the Daredevil run. I believe it was Louise Simonson. I believe she's the one that did Daredevil in the 80s. Very good stories with Typhoid Mary. And of course, they are they're turning it two things. One thing, they're turning it away from the comics. Because obviously, the comics, she had this in Elektra fashion, this salacious outfit that was, high heel boots and, mini skirt and a painted side of her face and her hair permed in true 80s fashion and sort of an off the shoulder blouse. This was the kind of thing I was looking forward to for Typhoid Mary. And we never got that. We didn't get the comic book version of Typhoid Mary in this. They went full born into the I don't remember the definition they called it, but of course a schizophrenic, where she is completely two different personalities. and the first personality being Mary, who was sort of a very chipper and sunny character who's always happy, and it was nice to see them, her and Danny together, and that it was kind of strange because they seem to get along at a time when Colleen's relationship with Danny was starting to slowly decline. That's kind of something you don't want to do, especially when your relationship is maybe hitting the skids, is to be friendly with another chippy perky blonde. But romance advice to the side here. And then she plays a cold, calculated uh, uh, Walker, which I don't know if that was that Typhoid Mary's name in the comics. I don't know. A much more accurate, I guess, presentation than the Elektra movies, Typhoid Mary, but still not Typhoid Mary. This is not the Typhoid Mary I wanted to see. Apparently, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the character that well, but this Typhoid Mary was a soldier, apparently, in the one of the wars, and she was captured, tortured repeatedly, and apparently, I don't know exactly if it was completely understood, but this caused a split personality between the two personalities that she has. Mary being, I guess, the better part of what she originally was, and then Walker being sort of the cold and callous, ready to kill at a moment's notice. And somehow there is, like I said, I'm not sure exactly how it ended, but Walker thought that Mary sort of, I don't know, seduced somebody that would help her to kill their captors and to escape. Mary thought that Walker was just such a, you know, bad bleep that she could go off and kill all these soldiers herself when given an opportunity. And they sort of leave notes to each other to sort of. Um, I thought a lot of the interplay where. I'm a sucker for transformations. I liked the interplay where, like, Iron Fist had to use the water to bring her out of the Walker persona, and then the Walker persona taking over as well. But again, it didn't feel, and the actress Alice Eve did very well. Um, I liked her in Star Trek Into Darkness. I didn't really know if she would be up to this role, and I would say that she is, but I didn't feel that she was playing Typhoid Mary from the comics. This just felt like they could have named her anything. They could have named her, JoJo Johnson or something, and I would have never thought of Typhoid Mary. I would have never thought of Typhoid. Um, I don't think she even used a sword, which Typhoid Mary I think used a lot in the comics. She uses guns and stuff. Which, oh yeah, by the way, there was another Turk cameo. I don't think I mentioned it in the Luke Cage review about the Turk cameo. I love seeing Turk. He's great. I like him when he keeps popping up in these shows, and is sort of a weaselly guy, and he's like selling arms to Ward and Typhoid Mary. So again, well acted, but it didn't feel like Typhoid Mary to me. That was a problem that I had because I was looking forward to Typhoid Mary because I think she's one of Daredevil's best villains. And I was hoping that she would be in a Daredevil season, but this is what they chose to do with her, putting her in Iron Fist. And again, it's not that bad, but it just didn't feel authentic to me. Okay, so let's see. Wrapping it up, did I forget anything to talk about here in this? Well, there was the off the top of my head, I know I have to touch on the dinner scene because even I was sort of, and I have a high tolerance for, you know, cheese and so forth, but it was kind of odd. It's like he's inviting Joy and Davos over, and they kind of know he and Colleen know they're up to no good, but they're kind of trying to be like, couples having a couples dinner or something, and they kind of know that they're up to no good, though. It was very odd, and I could see how that was off-putting. I think it was in Captain Logan talking about this with Eric. I don't think it was awful, but I do understand how that raised some eyebrows probably for people. And again, I don't think this season was that bad, really. I thought this was a pretty good season, just meandering. Things like that probably didn't need to be in there were in there, and that's kind of the folly of Netflix, where it's sort of why can't they streamline these things to be a little more no nonsense, a little more just get to the heart of the matter. Don't give us the scenic route, just take us right down the highway. That's kind of what I want of these shows, and I don't think we get them very, in that fashion. Oh, also, I should probably touch on the action. A lot of people were feeling that the action was lacking last season. I didn't see a huge difference from last season to this season. Of course, I didn't see last season's again since the first time I watched it. Again, I felt that Colleen sort of took over all the action scenes. I can't think of too many action scenes of Danny. And I don't know if that's because they don't trust him, the actor, to be Finn Jones, to be a good martial artist. Um, but it felt like they put a lot of their chips on Colleen doing these great acrobatic action scenes. And I don't know. I mean, I still feel that my biggest problem with the season is a lack of Iron Fist getting the focus. Now he did a couple of good action scenes at the beginning of the season. He did some good action scenes with Davos. They did fight. I think they fought. Was it two or three times? I can't remember. But we got some action from Iron Fist. I really can't complain. But again, my biggest problem felt like this was sort of Iron Fist being the side character in his own series, particularly in the second half. Now, I don't think the first half was that bad in that fashion, but I think in the second half, after he's got the power taken away from him, they sort of decide at that point that they're going to make it all about Colleen. Um, I don't know why. And like I said, my favorite scenes though is when she's training him. She is an important character to be sure, and I'm glad that they made her an important character. But it felt like they wasted the second half of the season giving her more props while they were taking them away from Danny. I don't get that, especially when the show was basically his. It's his to lose, and they're taking it away from him. Before we finish up here, what am I looking forward to for season three? Should there be a season three? Again, Ward is probably going to try to have to mend fences again. I felt badly for him, although it was understandable that his girlfriend didn't want to automatically take him back. Although I would think that it shouldn't have been as cut and dry as she tried to make it. I mean, I know she sort of says she doesn't want to take care of two children, because Ward isn't really all there himself yet. But at the same time, he isn't like this monster, she should have held out a little more opportunity for him to come back into both their lives, because it's not really that fair to completely try to cut him out when he was basically making strides. Davos is still alive. I'd love to see him come back and somehow get his Iron Fist powers back. I don't know if they got Colleen and Danny both sharing Iron Fist powers, they can give them to Davos. Let's have Davos come back again. I always said Davos was sort of what I hoped Baron Mordo would be in the Doctor Strange movie. I felt they ruined Doctor Strange. I mean, the diversity casting aside, I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about they really didn't give me a reason as to why he changed. And I think Mordo, why did he change? Why did he turn sides? I think Davos, it's clear that it's coming from a very human place of hurt and trying to prove himself. And he doesn't want to hurt his brother, but then again, he has to in his weird, rigid code. Same thing with Danny. I can understand why he doesn't want to fight Davos, but to give up the Iron Fist, I thought was a step too far. Joy, what is going to become of Joy? That is very interesting because, as I said, Typhoid Mary is still somehow tied to this plot. She's not leaving town as originally promised after doing the job. She kind of wants to explore her backstory some more of what happened to her when she was at the war, and she is going to use Joy as sort of a tethering line, I suppose, to get this information. So Joy is still stuck in a rough place, and I guess Typhoid Mary will be coming back, and I guess, like I said, I hope they make her more comic accurate. I didn't see the comic version of Typhoid Mary in this. I really hope they can bring her back. Like I said, I think the actress did very well. Um, from what I remember of the character in the comics, she wasn't so much rigid. She was more kick back and have a party. I didn't see that at all with this Typhoid Mary, and I think that was part of what disappointed me. She wasn't like a party girl, she was more a rigid soldier, and I think maybe that was SJW-ish, I don't know. And the same thing with, the Mary persona. I don't think she was so much a goody goody as much as she was just like an innocent. And I don't know if they played that up that well either. Um, Again, I don't know. So to wrap up here, let's see. I would say this was probably better than most of the shows that I've seen from Netflix, Marvel. As I said, I think the gold standard is still Daredevil season two's first 4 episodes. Uh, I would say this was better than season one, but not as well crafted as season one. Story wise, I think it was better than season one, but not crafted as well as season one. And in the same way, I think that this is better than Luke Cage season two, but story wise, not better than Luke Cage season two, but crafted better. I think Luke Cage season two was crafted better, but story wise, I think this season was better. Like I said, it's more of a superhero series than Luke Cage. We didn't get Luke Cage to have a cameo. Misty mentions that she's not crazy with the way Luke was behaving the last time she saw him, that Godfather scene. And that'll be interesting to see what happens. I can understand why they didn't use him because, the way we left him in the end of that season is going to be hard to, because Iron Fist did make a cameo on his show, but it was understandable that he didn't show up. Again, I liked Misty Knight's interactions here. I kind of thought they stole the show, Misty and Colleen. Not a bad thing, but then again, it's when the draw is Iron Fist, you want to see Iron Fist doing his thing. That's kind of what I expected. Davos again was great, so I am going to give Iron Fist season two 3.5 stars out of 5. That's 3.5 stars out of 5. Again, most of the shows can't break past 3.5 stars. I would probably give this one more if Danny wore a costume. That would probably make me even more excited for the prospect. If they tightened it up a little bit, if they made Typhoid Mary a little more close to the comic incarnation, if they didn't squander the end of the season by taking the fist away from Danny, I would have loved to see them both square off fist to fist. And unfortunately, it's Colleen and Davos that gets that fist to fist conflict. And, that kind of was disappointing. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to say pretty confident that this is probably top 3 of the best Netflix shows. I think Iron Fist season 2 is probably, like I said, I don't know. It's hard to pick when I like only a quarter of a season of Daredevil season 2, but and like I said, if you remove the first 4 episodes of Iron Fist season 1, I think that's a pretty good show. I think that's a compelling show. Here it just is a little bit of a meandering kind of storyline that seems to get all over the place and then gets pulled together slightly more near the end, leaves you wanting more. It's it's enjoyable. I'll put it that way. I think if you haven't seen it, you should, and give it a shot at least. All right. So once again, Iron Fist season 2, 3.5 stars out of 5. This is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.